In the last year, we have booked around 3,000 calls through cold email, and I'm going to run through a list of my biggest lessons that I have learnt, and hopefully if you are running cold email for yourself, this is going to help you essentially get more calls booked, and if you're helping others run cold email for their businesses, this is going to help you book more calls for them. So firstly, if you're not getting calls booked, typically it's because you're over-indexing on other people giving a shit about what you do. Typically, you have a business and you get some inbound leads, and so all the leads or the market you've ever talked to are people who want your stuff. Otherwise, you just wouldn't talk to them. The outbound market isn't like that. They do not want your stuff, hence why they're cold and outbound. So typically, you probably have to 5 to 10x how desirable or important your thing is for it to work on an outbound market. And this is why when you're selling outbound, you can't sell services, you have to sell outcomes, and you have to sell really desirable outcomes. So if you're running a campaign and you're not getting enough calls booked, try and make it 10 times more desirable, run it again and see if you are getting calls booked. And then if you're flooded with calls and you've got way too much to handle, at that point you can make it less desirable and move back down to a happy medium. But I would say most people that I talk to, if they're not generating calls through outbound, it's because they're over-indexing on their market, caring at all about what they do. So secondly, the goal is to convert a cold prospect into a client. That sounds so simple, but what people tend to do is they tend to be thinking that cold outbound is where you find other warm prospects out there. Like they don't exist, okay? You're trying to find cold prospects and turn them into business through an outbound system that generates typically a call, and then a sales process that builds rapport, typically over 2 calls, and then you move them into your system and you're onboarding in XYZ. So when you are building an outbound system, bear in mind you're not going and trying to find another pool of warm buyers out there who can just put into your inbound warm sales process. You're trying to sell to cold prospects, okay? And so they need to come through a different sales process that builds more rapport with them so you can sell them over time. So just keep that in mind. You're selling to a cold audience. They are cold. There is no pool of warm buyers out there, okay? Thirdly, everything will change. The tools will change, AI will change things, your competitors will try new things, your current approach will stop working because the market's seen it over and over again. This used to be scary, anxiety inducing, because it didn't feel stable. And in the past year, I have come to the realization that like all businesses are unstable. Like change will always happen. So instead of worrying about the change, just build dealing change into the process. What does that look like? Set aside time every week for R&D, for research and development. Set aside time every week to be in WhatsApp groups or Slack channels or YouTube communities where people are actively trying out new things, and try them out yourself. And if that's part of the process, even if you can put aside 4 hours a month into research, then at a minimum you're going to feel like you're on top of what's going on, and at a maximum you're going to be at the head of the snake, like tip of the spear when it comes to what's actually happening in the game. So fourth on my list is that a system is not random actions. So often you'll get calls booked through cold outbound, you'll take some random action and you'll get a close or 2 or whatever, okay? The thing is, that's a random action. You took different action on every single sales call, and some of them you sent out a proposal, and then some of them you booked in for a longer form video call, and some of them you booked into an email follow-up, and some of them you did this, and some of them you did that. If the system's not consistent, then it's not repeatable, and it's useless. I think Alex Hormozi had a really good point in a video that I watched a while ago, where he essentially was saying, if a salesperson closes a deal but doesn't follow the sales process, it doesn't count as a closed deal. Because I don't care about the closed deals, I care about building a system where it closes deals at a consistent rate that I control. Okay, that is an asset to the business. If we're just taking random actions, then we don't actually know what's working, and we're not actually improving over time. So we're trying to build an outbound system, not just get a few closes. So fifthly, you know you should be doing this. So it's a reminder, if you're not doing this, diversify your email infrastructure. Get Outlook inboxes, get Gmail or G Suite inboxes, get some SMTP providers, diversify. Even if you know that Google's the best right now, there's going to be some time in the future where it's not working as you'd like, and you don't want that to be Armageddon, end of the world. Okay, so just diversify your infrastructure. You've heard it 1,000 times before. This is the 1,000th and first time, and maybe this time it'll sink in. Another one along the same lines, quicker replies, more calls booked. If you can go from replying at that, having someone reply to all these emails and book them into calls at the end of each day, to doing it every hour, then you're going to book more calls, and those calls are more likely to show up, and you're going to close more deals. Again, you've probably heard this 1,000 times. It's just another time to remind you, reply quicker to prospects and you're booking more calls, and those calls are more likely to show up. The 7th one is a big one for us. It is record all your sales calls and use them not only to improve the sales system, but improve your outreach. So typically when you record sales calls, or sales calls are being recorded, they're used as like game tape for the sales team to improve their process. And that is super important, and we highly recommend doing that. But it can also be used for the marketing team to listen to all the game tape and figure out, what words can I use in the outbound to improve the outbound, right? And what objections do I get in the calls, which I can then use as objection handles on the lead generation, lead nurturing front. Because typically the person who's doing these email campaigns and replying to the prospects are not the ones taking the sales calls. So there's a disconnect between what's the reality foot on the ground happening on the calls and the person behind the laptop writing this email copy based off, YouTube templates that they're seeing online. Okay, so to bridge that gap, record all the sales calls, have the person who is writing their campaigns listen to these sales calls, and they're going to get a far better understanding about what's actually happening, and we can use that to improve the email copy so that we can get better results. It's a far, far, far superior way than just seeing the replies that come in and use the replies to improve the copy. Use the sales calls to improve the copy, because you can ask way better questions. What have you tried in the past? If you do that for like 50 prospects, you can then use that to write better copy. Why haven't you done this before? You can use that answer to write better copy, and so on and so on. And then finally, this is a mistake that we learned this year, it's a mistake we learned the year before, and it's a mistake we learned the year before that, and we keep making this mistake, so now I'm putting it in the video so that we won't make this mistake again, and hopefully you don't make this mistake. And that is, never stop selling. Okay, especially if you're running like a marketing agency, or in fact if you're using cold outbound to get calls booked and then you're selling, never stop selling, because what will happen is you'll stop selling. Typically it's because you need to fix something delivery wise, right? You need to improve your product, right? You'll stop selling, and then you need to improve your product, so you go and do that, and then you need to ramp up acquisition again, because even though you've improved your product, you don't know if it's fixed until you get more acquisition and more clients into it. And there's a ramp up process, and then it becomes a really tight squeeze because you haven't necessarily cut all your costs in this like fixing phase and ramp up phase, and it can get all stressful and you essentially fall behind. So if I can look back on the last couple of years of our journey, I would say when you need to fix delivery, don't stop selling, just figure it out. And a little trick or hack that you can use here is, if you really do not want to onboard any new clients because you're fixing, let's say you're onboarding, for example, just add an extra delay to the start. So you can close a deal and you can say, hey, there's actually a time delay at the moment, we're just tidying up some things, or we've got a waiting list, or whatever the excuse is. So instead of launching in 2 weeks, we need to launch in 6 weeks. Because of that, I'll decrease your setup fee because I know it's a hassle, blah, blah, blah. Whatever the excuse is, give yourself some breathing room, but don't stop selling. So these are some lessons that I've learned in the last year of doing email outbound. I hope they were valuable to you. If you've got any questions, you can leave them down below, or if you want to jump on the phone with either myself or Daniel, then you can use a book call link, which should be in the description of this video. See you in the next one. Peace.